In the far side of the galaxy, near a dying star, a great meeting was about to begin. Huge ships from many alien civilizations floated around a space station, shaped like a silver ring. This place was known as the Council of Allied Civilizations, a group of powerful and ancient races who ruled over most of the galaxy. They had existed for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They thought they understood everything, but today, they were nervous. Why? Because for the first time in 300 years, Earth had been summoned. Earth, a small, quiet planet in the Sol system, a world known for its emotions, music, and peace talks. Most council members thought humans were weak, friendly, yes, but not dangerous, not important. Still, something had changed. A report had arrived. An alien empire, the Grothal Dominion, accused Earth of interfering in their war. They said humans had used secret weapons. They said Earth had destroyed 3 of their ships without warning and then vanished. The Council didn't believe it at first, but the evidence was real, so they sent a summons to Earth. Not a request, a command. Now as the Council waited, a strange ship appeared near the station. It was small, black, and silent. No weapons showed. No lights blinked. It docked. A single human stepped out. He wore a simple black suit. No guards. No weapons. Just calm eyes and a soft smile. "I am Representative Alan Reeves," he said. "I speak for Earth." The Council was confused. Where were the warships, the escorts, the speeches? The head of the Council, a tall golden alien with 4 eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "your planet is accused of attacking a member of this Council. You have one chance to explain." Alan Reeves nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "we did destroy those ships." Gasps filled the room. "But," he added, "only because they were planning to invade a neutral planet, one under our protection." The Grothal ambassador growled, "You had no right. That planet is not part of your territory." Reeves looked at him calmly. "It didn't need to be. They asked for help." Another council member, a creature made of smoke, spoke. "Earth is not a military power. You refuse to join our wars. You have never shown such strength before." Reeves smiled. "We were being nice." Laughter broke out. A few aliens shook their heads. "Nice," the Golden Leader said. "You're threatening us now, with kindness." "No," Reeves said softly. "I'm reminding you, you've only ever seen the version of humanity that chose peace." The room went quiet. He pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the air. It showed a hidden war 50 years ago. Hundreds of enemy ships attacking Earth, but no one had known. Earth had kept its secret. In the hologram, Earth's forces moved fast, silent, brutal. The enemy was crushed in hours. One council member whispered, "Why didn't we hear about this?" "We didn't want to scare anyone," Reeves said. "We didn't want war, so we hid it. We cleaned up, healed the planet, and kept smiling." The smoke creature said, "That's impossible. You didn't have that kind of power back then," Reeves replied. "You assumed we didn't." The council began to understand that Earth had been growing stronger, quietly, secretly, while others showed muscles and firepower. Earth had been patient, watching, learning. And now, they were not asking for a seat at the table. They were warning the table not to tip over. The Grothal ambassador stood up, angry. "This is a threat. Earth must be punished." Reeves didn't move. "Try it." The ambassador laughed. "What will you do?" "Human." Suddenly, lights in the chamber flickered. The Grothal ship, parked outside, exploded silently. Just a puff of light in the stars. Reeves looked at the council. "That," he said, "was us being almost nice." The chamber fell silent. No. One laughed now. One elder alien, who had lived for 1,000 years, leaned back and whispered, "We made a mistake." The Golden Leader nodded slowly. "Maybe Earth isn't weak. Maybe they were holding back." Reeves stood up. "We came here in peace," he said. "But peace requires respect. We won't ask for it again." He turned and walked away, his steps quiet but heavy like thunder. The council didn't try to stop him. As his ship left the station, a message was sent across the galaxy. Earth is not what you think, and they're not playing nice anymore. In the outer rim of the galaxy, far from trade routes and peace treaties, there was a planet no one ever visited twice. It was quiet now, empty, but 50 years ago, it had been the site of a war no one ever talked about. No war records, no monuments, no witnesses, only Earth remembered. The council believed Earth was a young race, emotional, curious, a race that sang more than it fought. They weren't entirely wrong, but they never asked what happened when humans stopped singing. That truth was now in front of them, playing through the air like a nightmare hiding behind polite smiles. The room was silent, eyes locked on the hologram floating between them. The images weren't dramatized. They were raw, a black sky filled with ships, giant alien warcruisers, belonging to the Corvani swarm, a species that once called themselves the Devourers of Stars. No one had seen a Corvani vessel in over 4 decades. Now, the reason was clear that the footage showed the attack. Thousands of Corvani ships descending toward Earth like a mechanical storm. But instead of fear, they found resistance, efficient, ruthless resistance. Earth didn't respond with panic. They responded with planning. The hologram showed satellites turning, shields activating, railguns firing from the surface with terrifying precision. In less than an hour, a third of the Corvani fleet was reduced to debris. The rest tried to run. They didn't get far. A deep voice spoke in the recording. An old Earth commander. Calm, cold, and final. Clean sweep. No survivors. Burn the files and then silence. The next clip was even more chilling. A secret meeting room beneath Earth's surface. Leaders gathered. No celebration, no speeches, just a simple order: bury it. We don't want the galaxy to know what we're capable of. Let them sleep easy. The hologram ended. The council members stared at one another, no longer amused, no longer confident. One spoke, voice thin and broken. Why hide this? Reeves didn't smile this time. We studied your history, your alliances, your fear of strong newcomers. We realized showing strength too early would only cause panic. Or worse, an alliance against us. Another alien leaned forward, metallic fingers twitching. You destroyed an empire, alone in silence. Why help no one else? Why let others suffer? Reeves nodded slowly. Because you wouldn't have believed us. You would have said we were lying or interfering. So we helped in shadows, carefully, quietly. The air in the chamber grew heavier. One council member, younger and braver than the rest, stood. If this is true, then Earth is dangerous. You operate without permission, without order. That makes you a threat. Reeves looked at him. If you see protection as a threat, perhaps you never wanted peace in the first place. He tapped his wrist. Another file appeared. This time it was a rebellion far from any core system. The planet Arvix had been enslaved by pirates. The council had called it a local matter. Earth had called it unacceptable. No ships were seen. No armies landed. But the pirates vanished. All of them, in one night. Arvix was free. They never knew who saved them. They just woke up and the chains were gone. The council was shaken. This was no longer theory. This was history rewritten. And Earth had the pen the whole time. An older alien with skin like crystal and eyes that reflected stars finally spoke. You say you did this for peace, but peace through shadows is still controlled. Reeves looked him in the eyes. Would you rather we had come loudly, built giant fleets, claimed territories? That's your way, not ours. We chose silence. You assumed it meant weakness. The Grothal ambassador, still fuming from the loss of his ship, slammed a fist on the table. You're liars, manipulators. We should have destroyed you when we had the chance. The lights dimmed. No one moved. From above the station, something approached. At first it looked like a shadow, then it grew. A massive black object, cloaked, until now, slowly became visible in the station's upper sensors. A human ship. But unlike any they'd ever seen. Twice the size of any council flagship. No weapons visible, but no one needed confirmation. The message was clear. This wasn't a warship. This was a symbol. We've been here all along. Watching. Reeves didn't look up. He didn't need to. Be glad, he said quietly, that we decided to be nice. The council chamber stayed still for several seconds. Then the smoke creature spoke, voice soft and distant. How many other wars have you stopped without us knowing? Reeves answered, enough to keep the galaxy from tearing itself apart. No pride, no anger, just truth. And that, somehow, was more terrifying than threats. The golden leader of the council stood, slow and thoughtful. Earth, you are not what we believed. Reeves nodded once. No, we're worse. But only if you make us be. Then he turned to leave again. No one stopped him this time either. And as the door closed behind him, every council member understood something they had ignored for too long. Earth had never been sleeping. They had simply been patient. The council chambers were quiet, but it was not peace. It was fear. Every eye stared at the sealed door where the human had just walked out. But even though he was gone, his words still echoed through the walls, like the fading growl of something no one had seen coming for centuries. The council had studied thousands of species, cataloging their strengths, charting their weaknesses. They thought they had mastered understanding the minds of others, but now they realized something dangerous. They had never truly understood humans, not even close. In a private chamber above the council floor, A group of senior advisors gathered. Behind closed doors, they weren't diplomats, they weren't politicians, they were watchers, quiet observers. They existed to track threats the public didn't need to know about. For 300 years, Earth had been listed in their archives as harmless, filed under cultural interest, emotional species, unpredictable but non-threatening. File was now burning in the center of the table. They are not emotional fools, one of them said, voice sharp with disbelief. They pretended to be emotional fools. Another leaned forward, her skin rippling with anger. They told stories, wrote songs, shared food, ... They taught us empathy, not fear. A third voice, older, darker, replied, yes. And while we danced with their poets, they trained their monsters. The screen in front of them shifted. More data, more secrets. Every major war where the Council believed Earth was absent, they weren't. They were simply invisible. They had been influencing outcomes from behind curtains, stopping invasions, manipulating alliances, disrupting weapon trades, and they had never asked for credit. That alone was terrifying. A species that doesn't want power but has the ability to take it was a threat beyond calculation. Elsewhere, aboard his returning ship, Alan Reeves stood alone in the viewing bay, staring at the starfield behind him. A voice broke the silence. They're afraid now. He didn't turn good. They need to be. His assistant, a young woman in a gray uniform, walked closer. They want to understand us. You think they deserve that? Reeves finally turned, his face calm but unreadable. They've been watching our hands for centuries, he said. Let them try watching our minds now. Back on the Council station, an emergency meeting was called, not public, not even formal. Just 10 of the oldest species, the true powers, gathered in a sealed chamber without titles or names. They outthink us, someone admitted. They outplan us. Another added, they outfeel us, whispered one, to the discomfort of the rest, because that was the heart of it. Most species evolved through strength, logic or cold survival. Humanity, however, had evolved with pain, with love, with betrayal, with sacrifice. Their minds were not built for control, they were built for chaos. And somehow, in that chaos, humans found purpose. Not long ago, one Council race had tried to test human emotion by attacking a colony ship. They wanted to see how Earth would respond. Would they cry? Would they beg? Instead, a full planet disappeared. No war, no announcement, just silence. Later, Earth denied involvement, and no one could prove otherwise. But they all remembered what the stars looked like that night, empty, like something had taken a bite out of the universe in the Council's quietest archives. There was a theory once mocked by many, that humanity had a dual mind. One side loved deeply, the other destroyed without mercy. Both lived side by side, smiling through the same face. And now, no one was laughing at that theory. Another screen lit up in the chamber. It showed human children training, in virtual reality, learning diplomacy and warfare side by side, philosophy and strategy, empathy and ruthlessness. The program was called Dual Heart. One advisor whispered, they don't teach their young to pick sides, they teach them to be both. For the first time, the word dangerous felt too small. Earth, deep within a facility hidden in the Arctic. A room full of tacticians watched the Council broadcasts in silence. One of them turned to the others. They'll move against us now, won't they? The commander nodded. Not with weapons. Then how? He smiled coldly. They'll try to understand us. That's worse. Another screen lit up. A psychological report. One line was highlighted. Does not seek dominance. They seek meaning. That makes them impossible to predict. The commander folded his arms. They'll never understand that we don't want their throne. Then what do we want? He looked out the window, into the cold dark sky. We want to never sit on it in the first place. Back at the Council, a final question was asked. It came from the oldest of them, all a creature of light and sound, who had lived through 5 extinction cycles. What does Earth want from us? No one answered because no one knew, and for the first time in galactic memory, that silence was louder than any war. A single message appeared on over 77,000 secure channels across the galaxy. No warning, no trace, just one line. Your enemies have already lost. The source was untraceable. The language shifted for each recipient, perfectly translated into native dialects, with no error, no lag. Military leaders thought it was a bluff. Intelligence agencies called it psychological warfare, but 3 pirate factions vanished within the next 24 hours. No explosions, no distress calls, just gone. Empty ships floated where their fleets used to be, systems intact, crews missing, logs erased, and again, the message returned. We were only watching. You made us move. Panic started to spread quietly, behind closed doors. For the council, this wasn't war. This was something worse, something silent. In the high tower of the council station, the elite members gathered in private once again. Their voices were softer now, less proud, less certain. They're moving in the shadows, said one with skin like shifting mirrors. We see the results, but never the hands. They don't want territory, added another, her voice like wind. That makes them harder to stop. They don't follow the old rules. What do they want? Asked the youngest of them all. No one had a good answer. They only knew one thing. This was not a race preparing for conquest. This was a race enforcing balance, and balance was terrifying when it came from something you couldn't predict. On the far edge of space, a small moon called Drevix 4 lit up with activity. It was meant to be a secret base built by a council-led empire for black market trade, slave routes, and off-record research. That moon went dark within 12 minutes. Surveillance footage, what little survived, showed human drones the size of insects disabling power systems, doors, comms. The base's own defense turrets had turned inward. There was no shouting, no fighting, just confusion, then silence. 12 minutes later, the moon's communication system turned back on and broadcasted one sentence. This is your final warning, stay in the light. On Earth, the Global Leadership Council sat underground beneath ice and silence. There were no titles here, no flags, only decisions. A map of the galaxy hovered between them, red dots fading as operations completed. One of the observers asked, "When do we explain ourselves?" A woman in a plain gray suit, the current speaker, replied without looking away from the map. "We don't. If they still need explanations, they haven't been paying attention. But they're afraid. They should be." Another map lit up. Council sectors, trade routes, weapons suppliers, corruption networks, all marked, exposed. The speaker continued, "We've tolerated their arrogance for centuries. Let them feel discomfort. It's honest." Meanwhile, on the council station, the alien media was catching on. Quiet rumors leaked into public forums. Pieces of truth escaped like air through cracks in a hull. That Earth had neutralized entire fleets without conflict. That their weapons couldn't be detected. That they didn't conquer their erased intentions. That Earth was everywhere and nowhere. At first the stories were dismissed as propaganda. Then came the footage. One clip showed a Grothal ambassador in a private meeting with illegal weapons traders. The next day, that ambassador resigned in silence, leaving behind a simple note, "I was warned." Another recording revealed a planetary governor skimming credits meant for refugee support. 3 days later, the funds were returned. No investigation followed. No charges were filed. He just stepped down and vanished. Every time someone asked who was behind it, the same message returned. We were being nice. The phrase had become a myth, a whisper. But to some, it was a threat in disguise. Because behind that smile was precision, planning, patience, and now, action. Inside the council's strategy chambers, a vote was called, not to go to war, but to find out who, exactly, Earth was working with. No species could act alone like this. They suspected alliances, hidden tech, maybe even an AI takeover. But as the investigations began, one truth emerged. Earth had no allies, no pacts, no shared resources, no strategic exchanges. They had simply grown. Differently. Not louder, just deeper. One investigator summarized it best in his report. Earth didn't rise through dominance. They rose through observation. They knew what scared us and they chose not to become it, until now. There was no joy in that report, just warning. Across the galaxy, quiet meetings started in back rooms of powerful empires. New alliances formed, not to destroy Earth, but to understand them. They wanted to know what Earth would do next, but Earth had already moved on. A quiet signal was sent to a planet called Ishara, a world ruled by a tyrant for 40 years, untouched by council hands. Earth's response was not an invasion. They dropped a single satellite into orbit. It activated instantly, flashing one phrase across the skies, "Open your gates, or we open them for you." Within a day, the regime collapsed. No blood, no bombs. The people rose, as if waiting for someone to say the words first. That was Earth's power, not just strength but timing. Not just war but permission, and the galaxy began to learn. Earth didn't need armies, they needed moments, and they never missed them. The stars over Zeltrax burned blue, cold, and unaware of what was coming. In orbit, the Van Dominion's armada floated proudly, 30 ships, each bristling with weapons, shields layered in gold, hulls polished not for war, but for display. It wasn't power, it was theater. At the center, aboard the largest ship, The Van High Lord reclined on a throne of bone and crystal. His advisors buzzed with nervous energy, but he was calm. Earth had become a problem, they said. Earth was spreading fear, they said. He disagreed. They're humans, he told the room. Emotional, impulsive, weak when pushed hard enough. We've seen this pattern before. He raised a glass, full of something stolen and expensive, and now we remind them where they stand. He pressed a button. A message was broadcast, across all secured channels, not just to Earth but to every council species. Watching silently from the sidelines, you speak through riddles and shadows. We speak through fire. Earth has until dawn cycle to kneel, or we burn their cities as a lesson. There was no reply. The countdown began. Back on Earth, no one panicked. There were no alarm sirens, no emergency addresses. The people went to work. Children went to school. The planet, as always, was quiet, but far above, where the sky bends into space, something stirred. But one ship, small, unmarked, unarmed. It exited a fold in space near the Van fleet, without warning or fanfare. Just a lone, human vessel, drifting. The Van officers laughed. Some even clapped. A messenger ship, one of them grinned. Finally, they've come to surrender. They opened a channel. Static, HUMMED. Then a voice.com/female. This is Earth's reply. Silence. Then. Something subtle, almost unnoticed. Every Van ship's lights flickered, then dimmed. Not fully, just enough to send a chill. Sensors went blind. Weapons powered down. Every single system stayed online, but disobeyed commands. Then the message came again. You were warned. A ripple of heat burst from the tiny human ship. Not an explosion, just data. Invisible. Immediate. The Van flagship spun, its gravity systems reversing for 3 seconds, long enough to throw soldiers into walls, slam officers into consoles. The throne shattered, and still no death. Just humiliation. The High Lord screamed orders. Fire everything. Burn that ship from the stars. But nothing fired. His crew tried overrides, backup relays, manual systems. They all responded with one repeating error. This target is protected. In every language, across the galaxy, broadcasts went live, not from Earth but from the Van ships themselves. They showed the Van leaders' rage, his helplessness, the failure of a fleet that believed firepower made them gods. Earth had shown something worse than destruction. They showed control. The human ship didn't move, didn't need to. Back on the council station, dozens of species watched in silent awe. It wasn't the weapon that frightened them, it was the restraint. With that level of power, Earth could have wiped the Van from space. Instead, they simply paused and humbled them. A lesson, not a punishment. The council gathered for an emergency review. This isn't war, said one ambassador. It's discipline. They don't conquer, they correct, said another. The golden-skinned elder leaned back, eyes closed. They're no longer asking for respect. They're showing why they deserve it. Earth's message, sent minutes later, was brief. We've demonstrated what we could do. We won't do it again, unless asked. One sentence. A single line of peace, backed by infinite precision. The Van fleet drifted home days later, silenced, untouched. Their empire would collapse quietly over the next few years. No force required, just a change in perception, because no one feared the Van anymore. They feared the planet that chose not to destroy them. Somewhere in deep space, on a quiet moon base, Alan Reeves reviewed the footage. His assistant sat beside him, silent. They'll call this another threat, she said. He nodded. Let them. We didn't strike, we just interrupted. You think they understand the difference? Eventually, behind them, a map displayed hundreds of council sectors, some marked red, others gold, and a few, just a handful, glowed white. The white zones were different, places where Earth had already intervened, corrected, protected, not owned, not claimed, just watched. The assistant leaned forward. What happens when someone calls our bluff? He smiled faintly. We don't bluff. Back on the council station, a phrase was becoming more common, spoken in whispers, passed from mouth to ear like a prayer or a warning. They didn't rise. They waited. No one knew who started it, but everyone remembered it, because it sounded true. There was a time, not long ago, when Earth's name barely passed through the halls of the council. It had once been a novelty, an emerging race of artists, musicians, dreamers. They made curious films. They wrote strange poetry. They wept too, often, and forgave too easily. Now, they were a shadow stretching across the stars. Entire empires were rewriting policies. Fleets were being repositioned, not for war but for visibility. Not to fight Earth, but to avoid being seen as a threat to it, because Earth had shown what it could do. But what the galaxy still didn't know was what Earth had already done. In the hidden records of the Van Dominion recently seized and decrypted was a name that had been erased from most archives. Project Harrow. The Van believed they had started it. A galaxy-wide espionage program designed to destabilize rebellious planets, sabotage, misinformation, slow collapse, but buried deep in the data logs was evidence of another hand. The patterns didn't match Van tactics, they matched Earth. Before Earth had ever spoken at the Council, before they had ever been granted observer status, they had already infiltrated the galaxy's darkest systems. Not to destroy them, to guide them, quietly, subtly, with patience only humans seemed to possess. Entire rebellions that had succeeded because someone had disabled a fleet's tracking system at just the right moment. Medical supplies that mysteriously arrived in war zones just before outbreaks. Communications between resistance leaders that never should have been traceable unless someone had shielded them. It was Earth, and they had been doing it for over a century, not for glory, not for power, but because no one else was willing. When the truth surfaced, panic did not erupt in screams or weapons. It unfolded in meetings, hushed, anxious, too late. The Council summoned its internal ethics committee, something they had not done in decades. Their question wasn't how or why, it was this: how many victories weren't truly ours? A timeline was constructed, wars won, empires risen, regimes fallen. Every time something had seemed too perfect, too convenient, there had been a pattern, and always just beyond the edge of detection. Earth One ambassador, eyes wide with realization, whispered what others feared to admit. We haven't been ruling the galaxy, we've been living in Earth's sandbox. Elsewhere, in a hidden complex on Mars, Earth's archivists watched the Council fumble through half-truths. They didn't interfere, not yet. A historian looked up from her console. They're starting to see it now. Her supervisor didn't look up. Good. Let them chase ghosts. They're building a new narrative, making us the architects of everything, and she hesitated. Isn't that dangerous? The supervisor smiled. We didn't ask them to rewrite history. They're doing that themselves. Across multiple Council worlds, protests began not against Earth, but against their own governments. People were asking questions. If Earth had helped without asking for anything, why had their own leaders never done the same? For the first time, Earth wasn't being feared, it was being trusted more than the Council itself. That terrified the elites more than any weapon. In a last attempt to regain control, the Council proposed a new vote, a universal surveillance mandate. Every species, including Earth, would have to open their archives, reveal their actions, and comply with total transparency. The vote passed. Earth responded in less than a minute. They didn't decline, they didn't protest. They simply uploaded 3,421 documents into the shared system, time-stamped, clean, clear, records of every major action taken by their agents over the past 80 years. Each file contained the same closing line: we did this because no one else would. The Council expected deception. What they got was honesty, and the more they read, the worse it felt. Not because Earth had lied, but because they hadn't. There were no hidden invasions, no resource thefts, no colonization plans. Just quiet intervention, again and again, and always, leaving behind no trace, no reward, no flag. One ambassador threw her datapad across the room. They had control, and they gave it back. An elder creature spoke without blinking. They didn't give it back, they never took it. In a private Council transmission, a single message was sent to Earth. Short, cautious. What do you want now? Earth's reply came as a pre-recorded video. Alan Reeves stood in a sunlit room. No flag behind him, just a garden, a fountain, and wind. He looked into the lens and spoke without anger, without pride. We want nothing. We did what we had to do because we couldn't watch innocent people suffer while powerful voices waited for votes. We were not trying to lead. We were trying not to become like you. He paused. But we will no longer apologize for our methods. The feed ended, and for the first time, the Council didn't know whether to feel relieved or judged. Earth had not changed the galaxy by force. They had changed it by choice. And now, everyone was asking themselves one quiet, terrifying question. If the kindest species in the galaxy had been holding back all this time, what happens if they stop? Transmission was not intercepted. It was not encoded. It wasn't hidden in layers of ciphers or routed through shadow networks. It was public. Every world received it. Every terminal, every frequency, every sky that had once dismissed Earth as background noise now played the same message. A single human voice, calm and clear, speaking without emotion. We are finished being quiet. There were no images, No anthem, no threat, just truth. And that truth did what no super weapon had ever achieved. It silenced the galaxy. On Zero Prime, the markets froze mid-trade. On Alari, the high songbirds ceased their calls. Even in the core systems, where the oldest species lived inside stars, sensors recorded a drop in ambient communication rates. The data didn't lie. Everyone was listening, and no one knew what to do. Because no one had prepared for the possibility that Earth would stop pretending to be small. The Council called an emergency session, the final in a long line of increasingly desperate meetings. Some members argued for peace, others begged for negotiation. A few still clung to old pride, insisting Earth had no claim to authority. But there was no vote this time. There was nothing left to decide, because Earth hadn't asked permission, and that made all the difference. Far above the Council station, a ship the size of a small moon blinked into orbit. It made no sound, no announcement, no fleet beside it. It was alone, but not afraid. Council sensors scanned it, trying to identify origin, structure, weapon systems. They got nothing. Not because the ship was hidden, because it allowed nothing to be seen. Inside the Council chamber, a new feed appeared on every display, invited yet impossible to block. Alan Reeves stood again, dressed in the same quiet suit, eyes steady, voice neutral. He didn't look angry, he looked done. For generations, we watched. For decades, we waited. We gave you time to understand us. We gave you examples, evidence, kindness. You chose not to see. He paused, letting the silence breathe. You assumed peace was weakness, that restraint meant fear, that our silence was submission. Another pause. You were wrong. Somewhere a council general whispered, "They're going to declare war." But Reeves didn't. He didn't raise his voice or call for surrender. Instead, he said something far more dangerous. You will no longer control the narrative. Across the galaxy, archives opened. Millions of documents, declassified missions, audio logs, messages between oppressed planets and unknown benefactors. A full history, where Earth had always been there, quietly, carefully, refusing the spotlight. Until now, entire species learned, in real time, that their greatest victories had never been isolated. They had been assisted, protected, guided, by humans who never asked for thanks. On a border moon, a child asked their parent, "Why didn't they tell us?" The parent replied, "Because they didn't want to be feared, but now they do." "No," the parent whispered, "now they want to be understood." In the high vaults of the council station, the elders gathered. The oldest among them, whose skin had calcified into stone from centuries of rule, leaned on his cane of light and said, "We cannot fight this." "Then do we yield?" asked a younger voice. He shook his head. "We recognize." Recognition came quietly, not with formal votes, but with action. Council fleets began to pull back from contested zones. Long-ignored border planets received emergency aid. Slave rings vanished overnight, not through council law but through silent coordination. Food shipments were redirected. Medical teams arrived where once none had dared to go. But Earth didn't claim credit. They never said, "We told you." So, they simply watched the galaxy scramble to act like it had learned something. And still, Earth made no demands, no new laws, no declarations of power, just one final message. It arrived a week after the transmission. Simple text, unbranded. "We don't want to rule, we want you to do better. If you don't, we'll do it for you." The effect was immediate. Across council sectors, the question shifted from "Can we stop Earth?" to "How do we prove we're listening?" That, more than anything, revealed how completely the balance had shifted. Because Earth hadn't built an empire. They had built a standard. One not based on superiority, but on responsibility. In a garden on Earth under real sunlight, Alan Reeves finally sat down. No cameras, no audience, just wind and the sound of birds. A boy approached him. "Are you the man who scared the galaxy?" Reeves smiled faintly. "No, I just reminded them who we are." The boy sat beside him. "Why? Didn't you just take over?" Reeves looked toward the trees. "Because if you take power for yourself, you become the thing you stood against." The boy nodded slowly. "Will they come back?" "Maybe." "Will they forget again?" "Probably." "Then what happens?" Reeves closed his eyes. "Then we remind them again." And the galaxy turned, not under a flag, not beneath a throne, but in the quiet orbit of a world that had once been dismissed, and now would never be overlooked again. Tools.